So Julie Garay is the assistant director of Fresh New London, and she's with us tonight. And then Chloe Murphy is an incredible intern and food justice educator for Fresh New London. So we're delighted that you're both here with us tonight. I had the pleasure of hearing both Chloe and Julie at a health improvement commission meeting a couple months ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, we want them to come and share their expertise with us. So many of us are already major fans of Fresh New London, but some of us will be new to what you do. So first of all, welcome. I'm going to invite everybody who, if you can, to just mute yourself. Feel free to put questions in the text chat, and then we'll have a time for Q&A, and whether you want us to just say your questions, we'll do it that way, or through the chat, whatever is comfortable. First of all, Julie has shared that she has been in Connecticut, I think, since she was 3, after being born in Puerto Rico, knows New London by heart since then. And since you were a freshman in high school in 2011, when you first did some work at Fresh New London. So since then, you've also always contributed. You also shared that you're a crew member, has worked your way up from assistant farmer to assistant director. So, and uplifting youth voices in the Fresh community has been such a passion for you, and expanding sustainability for New London. So we're delighted that you're here. And then Chloe, welcome to you. You shared that you're a 21-year-old college student, and I happen to know you have midterms right now, so we really appreciate your time. And you've been a passionate member and a participant in food justice as an educator for Fresh New London. Your love for farming and food justice stems from your multicultural background as a Black Filipina Chamorro woman. And the histories of food, land, and education that come with your lineage are all a part of who you are and what you'll be sharing tonight. So welcome, and I'll hand it over to Julie to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm so excited to be here. I am going to be sharing my screen just so y'all can see some of our slides as we go along. And Chloe and I have a lot of experience doing this presentation, and every time we do it, it's like super different every single time. And it's really exciting, and it's different because, you know, we get to answer a lot of awesome questions from folks, and we just get to hear a lot of, you know, thoughts and things as we go on. So just as we're getting started, first thing I want to say is some rules in a sense that we have. Mute yourself if you can. You can keep your camera on or keep them off. I love seeing faces, so, you know, more than welcome to keep them on. And as we go along, you can either ask questions through the chat, or you can wait. We'll have some time at the end to answer some questions. So whatever you feel most comfortable for you. So let's get started. So Food Justice 101 from Fresh New London. So who are we and why do we do this work? So since I'm talking, I'll go first. So as Laura shared, thank you so much, Laura. My name is Julie Garay. I am the assistant director here at Fresh. And why do I do this work? So there's many reasons to this. Chloe and I talk about it all the time, and it always changes, really. But growing food for me really connects me to my roots and my people. I'm from Puerto Rico. The Taino people are the natives of the Caribbean and Puerto Rico. And as I grow food, it makes me feel really connected to my roots, makes me feel really connected to the earth. And my family, it's pretty amazing. If you go to Puerto Rico and you visit, I visit my family at least once a year. Every time I go, if you have a really tiny backyard or a giant backyard, we're always growing food. We always have avocado trees or breadfruit or mangoes, and it's all over the island. So it brings me home. Food makes me feel like like I'm loved. And so having my hands in the ground and helping other young people understand the complexities and also the simplicity of growing really just makes me really proud of who I am. And it makes me really proud to know that anyone can grow food, right? And anyone can share food. Anyone can cook it. Anyone can give it to their neighbors. And so that's why I grow food. And I'm going to pass it to Chloe.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, Laura shared a little bit about me, including the fact that I have a multicultural background. And something really fun about me and Julie is that not only are we best friends and coworkers, but both of our backgrounds include heritage in small islands that are currently colonies of the United States. So I'm Black, Filipino, and Chamorro. The Chamorro people are the indigenous people of Guam, which is a very small island in the Western Pacific. And just from that, I understand the relationships that colonized people have with food and how colonization has affected their ability to access land and grow culturally important crops. So that's something that I keep in mind as I do this work. On a personal level, my father is African American and my grandpa is from South Carolina. He migrated up to Hartford during the African American Great Migration. He grew up on a farm in South Carolina, so when he moved up to Hartford, he always continued to garden and farm with my dad and my uncles when they were growing up. And when I was coming up, that was a tradition that my dad kept. And every summer he grew a garden with my siblings and me. So that was initially what had brought me to Fresh, was that I learned it was an opportunity to garden. But now being with Fresh all these years, I've learned a lot of language to be able to articulate my relationship with the land as an Indigenous person, as a Black person. And this is something that I love to share with others in the community. So that's why we're here today.
Great, thanks, Chloe. So now, before we get started in the deep dive of the presentation, we want to ask you, what is one word or maybe one term you think of when you hear food justice? So you can add it to the chat. If you don't know how to work the chat, you can also just unmute yourself and say it out loud. But what is one word or one term that you think about when you think of or hear food justice? Equal access. Love that. Availability. Thanks, Steve. That's awesome. Equal access. Yes, equal. Not to be a given. Yeah. Yes, Deborah, I agree. It's wonderful. All right. Essential to health. Yes, Patsy. All right, great. And as folks keep going on, you can add more. But we wanted to start off like this because we all have different perceptions of food justice. And Chloe and I, I've been working in this work for 10 years now, and Chloe has been in this work for about 7 to 8 years now. And food justice really, exploitation. Yeah, thank you, Mary. Food justice really changes in our minds as we go on, as we learn new things, as we experience new things. And it's not a constant. If I meet someone and they tell me, I know what food justice is, I'll be like, huh? Like, okay, you know one singular thing of food justice, but there's so many different dimensions and ideas of what is food justice or injustice. Opposite of food desert. Yeah, thank you. All right, so, whoops, sorry. Okay, so fresh work is just work. So we wanted to start off with a little bit of what is fresh before we jump into food justice. So this little diagram that you see, or this kind of like bubble pyramid in a sense, is the image that we use to explain our work the easiest. So we have 3 buckets of work: growing food, empowering young people, and connecting communities. And all the terms that are on your left are terms that we always keep in mind when working in these buckets. So yeah, we grow food, of course. A lot of people know that. We have a lot of different gardens in New London. Currently, we have about like between 7 to 8 gardens right now we have in New London, and we're hoping to continue to expand. And these gardens can go from, you know, having 60 to 70 garden boxes where community members come in and they grow whatever they want. Or it's like little snack beds that are on a sidewalk or next to a park where children and young people and adults can just walk by as they're walking to school or walking to a store, and they grab a pepper, they grab a snack pepper, they grab a tomato, they grab some spinach for dinner, or some, I was gonna say cheese, but we definitely don't grow cheese. You can't grow cheese. Just all these different foods that are really accessible and easy and in our diet. We maintain them and people come and harvest. Whoever wants to harvest can do it. And one of our biggest parts of this work is our young people. So young people are a part of everything that comes with Fresh. We do the seeding. We've actually started seeding these last couple weeks. In this cold. We've been seeding. Once the seeds pop up, we're going to transplant them in the ground. We maintain them, we water them, we nurture them, we harvest them, and we give them out to community members. So we go through the entire process of growing food. But then we also do a lot of workshops and a lot of activities that help you understand, what is food justice? Why does our food system look the way it looks right now? Who created that food system? Who's benefiting and who's struggling in this food system? Is your family struggling? Let's talk about that. Why is a grocery store so far away from your house? I think Laura might have mentioned the opposite of food desert. That's what food justice is, right? So talking about what is a food desert? What is a food apartheid? Why do we live in these areas? Why is it so much easier to get a Coke, like a soda, as opposed to a fresh organic tomato? So we really analyze these things, and we create, because, you know, we know young people are so smart and so strong and resilient, especially now during COVID. We know all these things. We just want to help them find the tools to get where they need to go to really make change in our community. So thankfully, the young people that always come to Fresh, like, they're amazing. And it's pretty amazing. I was mentioning this a couple days ago, that Chloe and I are the first people on staff that have gone through the entirety of our youth program. So starting off as crew members, really young, working our way up to assistant farmers, working our way up to leading workshops, and now as assistant director and leading the youth program, Chloe is. So it's pretty amazing how we can create a leadership pipeline for our young people through our empowerment model. And then connecting communities. Every aspect of Fresh is connecting communities. We bring people, we bring our community into our all of our decision making. We bring our community, our volunteers, to growing food. A lot of times it's really fun because one of our main gardens is McDonald Park. And if no one has gone to McDonald Park, please go to McDonald Park. It's in New London. It's on the corner of Connecticut Avenue and McDonald. I think it's McDonald Avenue, Connecticut. No, McDonald Street, I think it is. It's a beautiful park. And that park right there really is an amazing example of what is community organizing. The city, came to Fresh and said, you guys need to build a garden. And we were like, we don't have to build a garden. We want to know what the community members want, what the neighbors want in their park. And it was a park, it was just cement. That's all there was there. So we started doing door knocking. We door knocked 80 to 100 doors in that neighborhood. And we started asking folks, what do you want to see in your neighborhood? What will make you feel like, this is my community. I'm feeling welcomed. I'm feeling loved here. So we actually ended up asking a whole bunch of folks. They said, we want a garden. We want a park for our children. We want somewhere to sit where we can have lunch, where we can have meetings, where we can hang out with our family. So that's what we did. And it's pretty amazing because young people were a part of all of that. Growing food was a part of all of that. And we always put our logo in the middle of these 3 buckets because it really shows Fresh is in the center of all these things. We marry all of them together, and we really work to create resilience, create food sustainability, self-determination. We really try to empower our people, power over the land and resources. We try to help folks get where they need to go to feel loved by their neighborhood and by their community. And of course, we always do celebrations.
So this is just a really concise, easy definition of food justice provided to us by the Portland and Multnomah Food Policy Council. I'm just going to read it and then we'll break it down sentence by sentence. So food justice promotes a food system that is inclusive, community-led, and participatory without the exploitation of people, land, or the environment. It identifies and acts to remove the significant structural inequities that exist within our food and economic systems. Food justice activists seek to establish healthy, resilient communities with equitable access to nourishing and culturally appropriate food. So when we talk about, Julie already talked about a lot of these things actually, but when we talk about a movement that is inclusive, community-led, and participatory, it just speaks to the importance of being able to bring in the people on the front lines, the people who are directly affected by food policy, by food apartheid, and by food justice, right? And we understand that within our current agricultural system, which is based on a capitalistic model, there is a lot of exploitation of people, farm workers, a lot of whom are undocumented immigrants who do not have protections of the law, despite being very, very important to stocking our grocery stores, to the food that we eat, and all of us having access to fresh produce that we otherwise wouldn't have. It also exploits the land. We have systems of monocrops that heavily rely on synthetic fertilizers and other inputs that deplete the soil. And if you know anything about agriculture, you know that the soil is everything. It's also detrimental to the environment. So when we talk about a just food system, we need something that is spearheaded by people who are directly affected by this, but which does not exploit all of the important aspects of a food system, including people, land, and the environment. We're also seeking to remove significant structural inequities that exist within our food and economic systems. So if we talk about intersectionality, it's easy to understand how things like ability, race, age, immigration status, gender, all these things are interwoven and affect your experience with not just the food system, but any system. But particularly, we're talking about the food system, right? So we need to remove the structural barriers that exist currently so that everybody can have equal access and proper access to the foods that are nourishing for them and for their families. We also seek to establish healthy, resilient communities with equitable access to culturally appropriate food is something really important. Julie already mentioned how important it is to have resilient communities. Resilient communities are the reason that we have a food justice movement in the first place, because we have had folks who have been struggling to get the nourishment that they need and get the culturally appropriate foods that they need. And they fought back by creating this food justice movement, right? And so something really important about this is not just healthy foods, nourishing foods, but also culturally relevant foods. To struggling, marginalized communities, a great way to fight back and exercise sovereignty is to practice cultural preservation, especially for Indigenous communities. I don't even have to tell you that Indigenous communities, our cultures are tied greatly to the land and the foods that we eat. So a great way to practice cultural preservation and food sovereignty is to be able to eat our culturally appropriate foods, as well as the fact that our bodies over generations have biologically conformed themselves to certain diets. So for example, Plains natives in the United States of America, their bodies are biologically disposed to consume things like buffalo meat, whereas somebody like me, I don't know how I would react to buffalo meat. So that's another reason that culturally relevant crops are super, super important to our communities. This sentence at the bottom says that access to healthy, culturally appropriate food for all is the result of building a just food system. Providing access to healthy food through pantries and soup kitchens is necessary and important work, but it does not change the system. So we just wanted to highlight that emergency food systems like soup kitchens and donations are really, really important to get food to folks who otherwise would go without. But when we talk about food justice, we're talking about systems change. And that's why we're talking about removing structural and economic barriers and also transforming our communities.
Thank you, Chloe. So I'm pretty sure that some of you, or maybe all of you, have seen this image. And usually you see the middle two images, right? So you see equity and equality, right? So when we're thinking about equality, we think everyone gets the same thing, everyone gets the same box, right? And some folks need more help than others. And some of us start in different places of, access than others do. And so we have to be really, really conscious and real about that. And we have to have that conversation of who are the folks that are actually struggling and who are the ones that are staying behind or who are the ones that are ahead and who are the ones that are behind. And so something that Alicia, our director, she loves about this image is that it adds the first image and the last image, right? So reality is that some folks have way too much. They have way more than they need, right? And then there's other folks who are so deep in struggle that they are basically in a hole, right? They'll maybe in their lifetime or their children's lifetime, they won't even get above the fence or be able to see the game, right? So when we're thinking about social justice and liberation, why is there a fence? Let's take the fence out. Let's take the barrier out. Why are we struggling to get where we need to go? Let's just take that all out, right? So social justice and equality and equity is really important in this movement because food is one of those things that not many people talk about, right? When we think about other injustices in our community, we see racial injustice, we see sexism, we see all these different isms like folks who are differently disabled or anything like that. You visually see those things for some of them, right? But food, folks don't really talk about that. Folks don't talk about their need to get diabetes medication or their need for asthma or inhalers. We keep that to ourselves. We keep that in our homes, right? So when it comes to food, we have to be more open about it. We have to be more accepting of the struggle and accepting of, let's take that barrier out. Let's start helping folks. And something that Chloe mentioned that I love is that soup kitchens, pantries, those are all essential, right? In the system that we currently live in, we need that. A lot of our folks need it. But if we get to the system that we want, if we get to the food system that we want, where anyone and everyone can access the food that they need and the culturally appropriate food that is for them, then we don't need the soup kitchens. We don't need the pantries because everyone has access to it. So that's something really amazing about this picture.
So when we talk about the food justice movement, there's pretty much two large objectives of this movement, and that's food access and food sovereignty. And these are things that you all have mentioned in the chat already and that Julie and I have mentioned. But just to get specific, we recognize that food access is the ability to produce and consume healthy foods. Food access includes a conversation about food apartheid. So I think most folks are familiar with the term food desert. And food apartheid refers to the same thing as a food desert. It's just a neighborhood or a community that does not have access to affordable, culturally appropriate, nutritious foods. So whereas in some communities, more affluent communities, you might see Trader Joe's or Stop and Shops or grocery stores where it's really easy to get fresh fruits and vegetables and meats. You might have other communities in which the only source of food is a bodega. And we've all been to convenience stores and we know that the only things they have to offer are packaged, processed candy bars, snacks, other things like that. But the reason we tend to use the term food apartheid is because it implies and alludes to a more intentional, politically designed type of landscape rather than a desert, which is a naturally occurring environment, right? But if we recognize apartheid, it's able to help us understand that the only reason that this exists is because of political, social, economic inequalities and structures, right? So when we talk about food sovereignty, we mean a community's right to define their own food and agricultural systems. So as we already mentioned, the current agricultural system that we have is based on a capitalistic model, and the primary motive is profit, right? And so that's how we end up with things like land exploitation, human exploitation, all these things. But if we are able to practice food sovereignty, communities would be able to say, no, I don't want my food grown with a bunch of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides that are harmful to the people who are working the fields, that might be harmful to me if I consume them. And we can say what types of crops we want grown. We already mentioned how cultural crops are really important to folks being able to practice cultural preservation, especially for Indigenous people whose cultures have been taken from them through cultural genocide or through land dispossession. So when we say food sovereignty, it's really important that communities are able to say how they want their food grown, who's growing it, what types of foods are grown, and make sure that every step along that food system is just and equitable for everyone involved.
Thank you, Chloe. And something I want to just highlight that I forgot to mention before. It's really easy to hear all of these things, right? And hear about the systems that we're living in currently and feel defeated and feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough for the change of this system. I'm not doing enough for my community. I'm not doing enough for other folks. And that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. And it's actually a good sign that you're feeling that way. It's a good sign to feel like, okay, wow, this is a lot, right? These systems have been built within like hundreds of years, right? They have been tweaked and perfected. And why is McDonald's food so good? Why is Burger King so good? Why is it everywhere? Why is it so close to low income folks, right? Those are all things, like they were all created on purpose, and they were created by teams and industries on years and years and years, right? So if we're trying to change this and we're trying to modify it so that it's good for us, so that it's right for us and it reflects our people, we have to understand that, like, yeah, if you eat a burger from McDonald's sometimes, don't beat yourself up, because sometimes you have to work through the systems, right? Easy, convenient, fast, not good food is just there on purpose. It's cheap on purpose. So we also have to realize shaming yourself and shaming others is showing that the system is working, right? So don't shame yourself, don't shame your diet, and don't shame others just because the system that is in front of them is so easy to be a part of. So I just wanted to highlight that and just be, real. Like, our work isn't about nutrition. It's not about carrots are so delicious. You got to eat more carrots, kids. Come on, broccoli. Broccoli is wonderful. It makes you fart. Farts are good. We're not doing that. We're not doing any nutritional education. We do some of it, right? But what we do is we just present healthier options, and we hope that young people start tasting it more. We say, okay, let's take a bite of this weird kale thing, right? If you don't know what it tastes like, it tastes pretty good. It's all about just getting our foot through the door. That's really what it is. We're trying to change the system one step at a time, one person at a time. So I just wanted to highlight that. All right. So relationship building. The majority of our folks here in New London that are low income are people of color, predominantly Puerto Rican, Dominican, Jamaican, Haitian, right? And through these cultures, we do cultural celebrations and we do cultural connection through food. We sit down, everyone does kind of potluck style, everyone brings something, and we all just talk and laugh around the table. So we really want to embody that and bring that into our circle, right? Into our work. So throughout our relationships, we create stronger communities. We understand each other more. We understand that, my neighbor that I've been living next to for the past 10 years is actually really awesome. And her curry goat is amazing. And her rice and beans is delicious. I'm going to bring her some of this, So education and relationship centered by food is one of the biggest and most amazing parts of our work. So sadly, because of COVID, we haven't been able to do this as much, right? But we're still sharing food. We're bringing it in containers, sealed. I bring it over to Chloe's house all the time. She brings me food over all the time. We sit down, we talk about our work. And it's something that is such a big staple in our community that we have to continue. Because if we don't continue this relationship building through food, then no one's going to feel comfortable at Fresh. No one's going to feel like, oh, this is my family. I think a lot of my connection through the staff at Fresh, they're basically my family, my second family, is because we bond through our food. We learn recipes. We talk about it, right? We talk about the burnt rice that I just made yesterday. Julie, give me a better recipe. Of course I will, right? So let's talk about that too. And in connection to that, solidarity. Solidarity is a big part of relationship building. Through the supports and the communications that we have, if I'm struggling with what I'm going through and I tell Chloe and Chloe tells me, oh my God, Julie, I'm going through the same thing, that right there is building solidarity. We're creating support with one another. And we really try to make space for that. We try to have as many, because of COVID, we're trying to make more Zoom calls instead of in-person meetings. We sit down, we talk about the struggles, and we try to talk about, all right, what's going on in the city? What is going on in New London? What's going on in your neighborhood? What do you need? How can we support you? Do you need us to drop off some boxes of food every week? Of course we will. No charge, right? So that's how you build a resilient and strong community, because New London and many other communities like New London, we are built with strong, amazing people already. We come from amazing countries. We come from amazing families that have already instilled strength and resilience in us, right? But together, we can move mountains, basically, right? So if we're not talking about it, how do we know? How do we know that we're going to move mountains? We don't. So just by creating solidarity through our struggles and our love for music and dance and plants and anything else that you can think of. We even talk about goats all the time. We talk about how much we love goats. We build resilience through goats and solidarity through all those wonderful things. So that is something that's so important in the food justice movement, but also in Fresh.
So when we talk about food justice and all the barriers that get in the way of achieving a just food system, it's important to understand how did we get to this in the first place. And we've alluded to this throughout the presentation so far, but just to get specific, we should look at the relationship that capitalism has to land and labor. So on the left side of the screen, we have a visual. It's actually a couple years old. It may not even be accurate anymore. There may even be fewer corporations in the center of this image, but suffice to say that it's only about 10 corporations that control the entire food system. So when we go to the grocery store, we have this quote unquote illusion of choice, and we think we're buying all these different options, when in reality, it's a lot of the same corporations that benefit from each of those purchases. And it's important to recognize this because there's another strain of activism that we can call vote with your fork activism. And that's pressuring individual consumers to make individual consumers decisions about where they're going to put their money so that we can either support or not support different corporations, which are all corporations. And that's fine. And it's good if you have the means to be able to do that. It's really good and really important to be able to support locals, support small, all of those things, right? But we also have to understand that that is only going to take us so far. What's more important than individual consumer decisions is collective action so that we can transform systems. Again, it always goes back to systemic change and transformation, right? But when we talk about that, we can understand how capitalism is the driving force behind that. So capitalism is a free market system that is based on a drive for profits, right? In order to do this, capitalism works on the extraction and the transformation of raw materials and resources. So some really important inputs are things like land and labor. So we understand that the United States, where we all stand right now, is indigenous land. We're only here because a lot of people were dispossessed of their ancestral lands, right? And that land was turned into farming land, it was turned into factories, it was turned into packages for sale. And not to mention a lot of the farm workers who are exploited right now, they're working out, especially on the West Coast, down in Florida. A lot of those folks are indigenous folks who have been displaced from South and Central America. So when we think about all these systemic barriers, it's really important to honor the land and the folks whose labor has been exploited in order for us to get to this point where we are in the food system, and keep in mind that we're fighting for them as well. So, sorry, I'm just checking in the chat. Great conversations. If we want a just food system, we have to honor the history that brought us here and recognize that people of color and low-income families often feel powerless over these systems. So that's what Julie was talking about. A lot of times this work can be really discouraging and it can feel like a big burden. You know, we're up against these giant corporations who have lawyers, they have lobbyists, they have seats in government. If you look at the USDA and the FDA and all these federal departments, a lot of the people in charge of these, a lot of the secretaries and heads of states and everything, are former CEOs, a lot of these big brand corporations like Tyson and Nabisco and other brands, right? So for us, it can often feel like we're up against big giant monsters. And we have to recognize that if we're going to build solidarity and resilience. We also have to recognize that climate change and food insecurity are often invisible types of violence. And this is what Julie was talking about as well. But when we look at things like environmental racism and diet-related illnesses, it's really easy to see that these systems are quite literally enacting physical violence against our bodies and against our communities, right? We also have to recognize that being healthy can invoke shame and blame. And this is, again, what Julie was talking about. We're not here at Fresh to pressure people to eat carrots or broccoli. We're not here to pressure people to vote with their fork. We're just asking folks to stand in solidarity with us as we work towards systems change, right? So rather than doing that, we're encouraging folks to get involved and take action. We have to recognize that collectively building power, self-determination, and agency can heal us and build real movements. So again, it's just alluding to the importance of solidarity, people power, and resilience. We also have to recognize that connection is key. Connecting people to land, each other, and culture is really important. So again, when we talk about a lot of us exist as Indigenous people who are living in diaspora, like me and Julie are both in diaspora right now. Neither of us is either in Guam or Puerto Rico or Africa or the Philippines. So it's really a great tool of cultural preservation for us to be able to make connections to land, each other, and our cultures, right? And we're always going to vote for inspiration rather than blame. And celebration is also really important. As burdensome as this work can sometimes feel, and like we're up against these big monsters and we're really small, we do have to celebrate a lot, and we have a lot to celebrate as well. So we always talk about our successes and we lift people of color in the work.
Thank you, Chloe. So we're getting to the end of our presentation. But as some folks, whoever, you know, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram or any other social media, or if you just, you know, get our newsletter through the mail, Fiddleheads, which is our local food cooperative, they actually, their birthdays are in February, or is in February, and they choose a different organization every year to celebrate or uplift. And so they chose Fresh this year, and one of our social media folks, coordinators, her name's Grace, she's amazing, she's a con student, she created this diagram kind of showing folks what we're doing right now. And we're doing a lot. We're trying to grow a lot of snack beds. We're trying to make it so that, you know, like I said, families, children, youth walk by gardens and can bring some vegetables home for their families. We're trying to actually also build some garden beds in people's backyards and front yards so they can grow for themselves. And a lot of the folks that receive those garden beds, it's mission based. So they either pay very little to nothing, and we're able to do that through a lot of grants and a lot of fundraisers and things like that. So we're really thankful for that. And we do a lot. And thankfully COVID has many bads, but thankfully something that helped us through COVID is really recognize and celebrate, like Chloe mentioned, celebrating the little things if we can. We were able to celebrate the fact that we have been able to do so much for so long, and throughout COVID we still are doing more and more and more. And so it's really special and amazing. And it's folks like y'all that ask us to present and do all these really amazing things. It just shows us that, you know, we're on a good path. So I just want to say that. And I'll maybe just go to thank yous and question time, but I'll put it back to the other side if folks want to keep looking. But yeah, I guess we're done and we're ready for some questions. And I'll ask Chloe, do you have any closing thoughts before we answer some questions?
No, I don't have anything. We just shared a lot. I'm really excited to hear from you all, what you think, what you're wondering.
And folks can either unmute themselves or add it in the chat. Yeah, snack beds is something that we were thinking about for many years, and we started building like 2 years ago, and it's been an amazing success.
So I think that I'm really taken with that approach as a way to sort of spread the love, so to speak, but get people involved on sort of a smaller scale. And then I could see, so can you talk a little bit more about your hopes for that in the New London area? Like what are you, if you dream big about that, what do you hope for?
Yeah, of course. So I'll add a little bit, but Chloe, if you want to add some more too. But I think our main hope is just access for more folks. You know, the majority of low income folks in New London do live in food apartheids. I just moved back into London. I grew up in New London and I just moved back into New London, and I kind of live in a food apartheid. Like Fiddleheads is very close to me, but for a lot of folks, they can't really afford Fiddleheads. So being able to just go along and walk to school, walk home, walk to, you know, wherever and grab food is it's combating food inequities in our community. And it also just really amps up young people. Young people are like, oh my God, I need one of these right next to my house. There's a park right next to my house. That would be a great spot. There's a lot of children there. Like, let's add more and more and more. So yeah, Chloe, I don't know if you want to add a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is always just to transform the landscape and go about it in alternative systems. I think communities are really awesome at creating alternative systems for themselves. And the best thing I think about community organizing is that you can make it really specific to your neighborhood. So what works in a place like Norwich or Waterbury might not work in New London, even if we have similar models. But something that's great about these movements is that folks are always sharing ideas with each other, but then we're able to adapt it and make it fit to our community. So something the Jackson, Mississippi, I forget the name of their project. It might be called something as simple as the Jackson Collaborative, but they have something called the Time Bank. So they recognize that within their community, a lot of people do not have money, like they don't have money, but a lot of them have skills. A lot of them know how to fix a sink or sew a sweater or knit a sweater, sew a dress, something like that. So something that they came up with in their community is that you're able to give your time and exchange services with one another and like that. So I just think that we're always able to come up with alternative systems so that we don't have to be conforming to a system of like monetary exploitation, but we're also able to transform our landscape and make it specific to our communities.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in and give a shout out for Jackson, Mississippi. I think that's an awesome model. They are maybe one of the most leftist progressive cities in the United States right now. I mean, I think they have a mayor who openly identifies as communist. So it's a really, really interesting model for what can happen on a local level in these places that you don't think of as being, I don't know, on the map for social justice or politics or things like that, but they're doing awesome stuff in Jackson. So anyway, I love hearing about that, and I love that that's a model for New London. And then I just wanted to I don't know, I share how much your emphasis upon positivity and upon inviting people into something that's encouraging as as opposed to being shaming. That again resonates with me really deeply in this particular cultural moment where there's so much blame going on, there's so much finger wagging and shaming and things like that. But this feels like, I don't know, like where we who care about social justice ought to be directing ourselves. Anyway, yeah. Just wanted to say that I love all this stuff that you're doing.
Something a quote I want to share from Mariam Kaba. Mariam, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she's like a really awesome abolitionist. She has this quote and she says, "Do not let this move you to despair, but rather radicalize you into action." And I think like I've never made that connection, but I think we do that at Fresh. I hope we do that at Fresh based on Steve's feedback. There's a lot of questions in the chat, so I think Julie and I will start answering those. And one of them I see, do we have greenhouses? So we have one, oh my gosh, we have one, we call it a greenhouse. I don't think it's officially a greenhouse because it's not encased in glass. We just have like this really thick plastic over metal hoops at our main education urban farm site in New London. And we are able to grow things like sweet potatoes in there and start seeds in there. We don't have like a big official effective greenhouse, although through community partnerships, we have been able to use the greenhouses at Conn College and maybe one or two other sites. I don't know if Julie wants to jump in.
Yeah, we're hoping to. So we have a space called, basically it's our cottage street space, and we're growing in the ground, which is really exciting. It's like a 3-tiered kind of area. And the higher you go up on these 3 tiers, the less lead there is in the soil, because that's one of the biggest challenges in growing in a city is lead and other toxins in the soil. So something that's really amazing is the highest point of this garden or this farming area has the least amount of lead. So we've been growing a lot of food in there for the past 2 years now. This is our 3rd year. And we're hoping to do a really big fundraiser kind of like grant thing. So someone asked like how we get most of our grants or support. Do we rely on? The majority of the support is grants and fundraising. But you know, there's so much to do at Fresh that a lot of times like our fundraisings kind of like fall back, and we mostly we mostly run on grants, but we're hoping to do a lot of fundraising and grants for the next couple of years so that we can build a really big greenhouse, insulated, heated greenhouse, so that we can have those like really, like I said, a lot of our young people are from like the Caribbean. So a lot of them are like, we want plantains and we want taro and we want this and we want that. And I'm like, we can't do that right now, but hopefully in the next couple of years. So yeah.
We have we have a fundraiser going on right now. It's being mainly run by a community partner of ours. I don't know if you all have heard of it, but Julie and I can email the link to Laura if you all want to check that out and get involved. Edible New London is a project that we're working on. So it is a project under Fresh New London, and it just refers to our 5-year plan to transform the landscape of New London and make it edible. So we're envisioning lots of snack beds, fruit trees, just really public installations that make fresh food accessible to anybody walking by. Greenhouses would be great for being able to continue to grow things in the winter because we are hardy New Englanders. And in reference to Deborah's comment, the New London Community Center. So interesting, I don't know how many of you all know, but New London has not had a community center in recent history. The closest thing we had to a community center was the Martin Center, which was an old school building, but it had like offices and a gym. The summer camp was run out of there and everything. But it wasn't like a full community center or community center space in the usual conception of the word. It was recently sold by the city to a developer for $1. So now we have nothing, but there is a young man named Clayton Potter, who is trying to start up this nonprofit organization, which will be a community space that will have an art space, a kitchen, lessons, hopefully a swimming pool. There will be shared office space for all of the nonprofit organizations in New London to have office space. So that's going to be really awesome. The mayor and the city council, I think, also just approved construction for a community center down by Fort Trumbull, right on the river. Most of the community members are not as invested in that plan because the location is not going to be great for young people to get to. A lot of us don't have cars. A lot of young people just walk, and it's on like the farthest side of town. So we'll see how that goes. But hopefully we'll be able to get some involvement over there as well. How can the community how can your church help support our efforts? Well, yeah, definitely one way is that Julie and I are going to send over the link to the live fundraiser that is happening right now. The first 25 people get a free fresh poster, but I don't know if 25 people have already donated. Either way, you'll get a prize somehow. We also rely heavily on volunteers. That's another way that we sustain ourselves. COVID has made volunteering really difficult, but I think we're definitely able, through a lot of coordination, still able to get volunteers in this space. Oh, we are hoping to get our youth to participate. Yeah, that's awesome. We're gonna start recruiting like now, actually, for young people to start signing up for the spring and summer program.
Great.
Chloe, for covering a lot of those questions. So I think we have, 1 or 2 minutes left for a couple more, like one more question or maybe two. Or if folks are just feeling all the love and ready to be inspired, and that's also.
I have a question. Are you guys familiar with a little group? I think they're called Nova, and they're doing hydroponics in New London. Are they working with you?
Yeah, so we actually had a partnership with them. I think last year we had a partnership with them, and in our one of our main farming spaces, the Cottage Street space that I was talking about, the 3-tier, the closest part to the sidewalk, we had like 6 to 8 stations of aquaponics kind of thing, or hydroponics, and we had a lot of cucumbers. The basil did amazing there, and I think we're hoping to do a couple more of those again this year, because that was one of my main spots to get cucumbers. Yeah,
cool. And I know, Deb, you had a question.
Well, I'm just thinking that that if you could be specific as to what kinds of volunteers would be helpful to you, to your point that there are people that have skills and knowledge and interest and potentially even availability, grant writers and that sort of thing. I wouldn't know how to write a grant if you put it in front of me, but I could help plant the vegetables kind of thing. So part of what I'm just thinking is that if you could be, rather than just we could use volunteers, if you can be more specific, I think there are a bunch of us that could really prompt and find specific people in the community that might have what you're looking for.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The majority of the folks that we think of for volunteers is just folks that want to do some planting, get their hands dirty, are down to be around some young people on Saturdays. Usually we do like Saturday mornings. Usually we do it from 9 to about 12 or 10 to 12. And we usually meet at the garden. We do some seeding, some planting. Sometimes we do some cleanup. And then for folks who are really good at projects, like if they have carpentry skills or anything like that, they can reach out to us and just let us know if they're interested. And we can talk to the farmer, and the farmer can schedule some time to, okay, I need some help with, some carpentry here, or it's really kind of like whatever your skills are, or if you don't have too many skills, you can just show up and we'll help you learn some stuff.
So that might be helpful to know. Where do people show up? We could let them know, but also to ask your farmer, what do you need built?
Yeah, I think we'll be meeting with him on Tuesday. So if I can kind of get a list in mind, and I think we're going to start doing volunteer days on Saturdays, starting the end of March, when it's not as cold or rainy or wet. And so once that all starts, we'll get a list for y'all. And we also have staff meeting on Saturday, so we can talk about all these things and get an email of some detailed things out for y'all, and it'll be a little bit more clear.
Great,
Can I just shout out to Mary Tomasetti, who's nodding her head enthusiastically here. She's one of the providers, you know, your gardens that you gave away to people.
Yep.
She donated a buttload of gigantic tree, you know, big black planting tubs that came from trees.
Yeah, those were so awesome last summer when COVID hit. Oh my gosh, we were really like trying to get people like at home growing sets. So we built a ton of beds. Those containers were really important, especially for folks who maybe didn't have access to a backyard, who maybe lived in an apartment or something, so that they could grow too. And I took one home to have strawberries, because I don't know if y'all know, but strawberries will like take over. So they're really great to have in a contained space. So thank you for those.
Yeah, I also just want to add really quick that there was a student who, I think she's in one of these pictures. Yes, the one that's laying on the ground there. Her name is Mari. And she moved, like in the middle of COVID, she had to move to a different apartment and she didn't have any space for a garden box. But we were like, oh my God, we have these tubs that can fit like in really convenient places, even on a porch. And she was like, yes, please. And she's the oldest of 3. And her little siblings, as soon as I got to their house with my truck and I took out the bins, her siblings started running outside with no shoes on, like screaming like, oh my God, we're gonna plant things. And she was like, oh my God. Wow. So it was really amazing to have those, like, it really changed the experience of COVID in the spring for a lot of people. So thank you.
Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks, Miria. And thanks, Julie and Chloe, for what you guys are doing. And I mean, I have virtually an endless supply. So I'll throw my name in the chat and you can reach out anytime you want.
Thank you.
And I'll come find you and volunteer anyway, but.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Wow. Wow. Well, I know our time is up, and I know, Chloe, you need to go on to another Zoom. How to begin to thank you for this? There's so much information that you shared. I knew Fresh New London was a special place, but the extent of the work that you're doing on behalf of the community and expanding food justice in your area is just so inspiring. And so we will look forward to having you back and hopefully seeing you this summer around New London, and who knows, planting snack beds all over the place.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I just, Chloe and I love giving tours, and the young people also love giving tours. Great. So anytime y'all want to come and visit, just let us know and we'll be more than happy to give you a tour.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Fabulous.
Appreciate it. Wonderful.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.